Laureen has a long resume, so I'm not going to go through all that. But she loves museums and nonprofit organizations. She has been involved in the field since 1996. Her passion for evaluation and all of the good that it can do for institutions, programs, projects, and people continues to grow. She is currently an evaluation coach and consultant, and I'm going to stop right there because, like I said, her resume is very long, and I would rather we spent the time listening to Laureen. So take it away.
Great, thank you all very much. I thought we'd start off, you might think I'm in the wrong place based on the slide I have in front of here, but I was asked to think about evaluation and then present it in 30 minutes. So I had to channel my just one thing mindset, and this is what I came up with. You're probably looking for the connection. Who is this? Yogi Bear, in memoriam, unfortunately, at this point. What is Yogi known for? His sayings. This is probably one of my favorite of his. I actually feel like it guides my life most times. There's also another gentleman. His name is Lawrence Peters. This amazingly is the best picture available of him, which probably tells you a little bit about him. He has a similar idea behind this. This idea that if you don't know where you're going, you're probably going to end up somewhere else. Now, as a human being, attached, detached, or unattached from my evaluator side, I love these sayings. They kind of make me smile. They're a little pithy. They get pretty deep when you start to think about it. But as an evaluator, this is what's happening in my mind when I hear these sayings. Because the problem is, if your program doesn't know where it's going, no level of evaluation will be able to tell you if you got there, because you don't know where there is. So part of the very beginning part of trying to understand evaluation is that you need to define success. You have to define it in order to know if and how you succeeded. And that's kind of the first part of starting this road to evaluation that you might be on. So how do you do that? How do you define success for your programs? For the most part, you define success most like you do for yourself every day. You set goals for yourself. In the evaluation world, we call them outcomes, but they're one and the same, goals and outcomes. And we do this all the time. So if I tell you right now that part of signing up for this workshop means that you're running the National Park Service 10K this weekend, I'd like you just in your head right now, set a goal for yourself. What would your goal be for the National Park Service 10K happening this weekend? What's one person's goal? Finish. All right. What else?
Be a good volunteer at the water station.
Be a good volunteer at the water station. I like it. What else?
Don't die.
Don't die. It's a good goal. Don't walk. Okay. So you probably all, some people might just want to start. Some people want to finish. You know, this is success to some people. Getting a personal best record might be success to some people. Maybe just feeling like you're really fast. I mean, I like to just feel like I'm fast even though I'm not. Feeling like this when you get to cross the finish line. Not feeling like this at the end. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe that's good because that meant you got to the finish. The point is, you have a different definition of success for yourself, for what you're doing, and your programs will have different definitions as well. So depending on the program, depending on the time, depending on the audience, you're going to have a different definition of success. So again, you have to define the outcomes, the goals that are specific to your program, and that becomes your definition of success once you define them. And the beautiful thing is they're your definition of goals. It's what you want to get out of this program, what you want it to achieve. So if you take this idea that defining success means setting outcomes, what do these outcomes actually do for you? Outcomes are a way of being really intentional about your planning. They're the perfect example of backwards planning. So if you can start with, this is what I want my audience to get out of this program, then you start to think, well, if that's what I want them to get out of the program, what activities are best matched in order to achieve those goals? then what resources do I need to do to line up those activities? So it's the place where you can start, where you intentionally plan for your outcomes. You set them and then you plan backwards. Outcomes also allow you to measure impact. Maybe a word that you're hearing more and more if you're a grant writer, if you're looking for funding, if you're trying to define a level of success for your programs, impact is probably something that you're looking for. The reason they allow you to assess impact is because you can measure outcomes. That's where the evaluation comes in. And if you can measure something, then you can describe the level of impact it had on your community, on the audience that came through. So it's all about thinking about how it impacted your audience and the difference essentially that you're making. And outcomes, they equal funding. Your pieces of pie are probably not getting larger. They're actually probably getting smaller based on federal government spending, all of that fun stuff. And so part of this might be having to start looking for sources outside of the Park Service. Maybe going to corporations, foundations, and people who are funding things. They want to know, what impact is their money making? How are you using their money, and how is it making a difference? So if you can have your outcomes and your impact, it can equal funding. So a large part of the conversation that happens right now, that every single one of you are already doing right now in your park, in your programs, is we're all very good at saying what we're going to do. We are going to do a tour for some Boy Scouts on Saturday for 2 hours in our park. That is the first part of the conversation. That's the first, what are we going to do? In order to kind of take it to that next level in terms of thinking about your outcomes, this is the question. What difference are we making? That's great to know what you're doing. But now the next step is, what difference is that making? Why does it matter that you're doing a tour for Boy Scouts for 2 hours on Saturday? What difference does that program make? And that's just the continuation of that first question. It's not stopping in the first question. It's taking it to that next step. This is also another question that we're all very good at answering. What activities do we deliver? So it's kind of like how we do things. We're going to do some hands-on activities. We might have some small group discussion. We're going to learn leave no trace principles. Again, we all are doing that now. So how do we take it to that next level? What results were achieved? It's starting to fill out the bigger picture of the program. It's giving that second half of the picture. So it's not only what are we doing, it's what happened because we did it. What did we achieve because of the activities that we did? And then lastly, again, who participates in how many? We're all very good at counting. How many visitors, how much staff time, how many volunteers. Again, it's a really important part of the puzzle, but it's only one part. So the outcomes becomes who benefited and how. How did they benefit? So thinking about outcomes is thinking about what you're already doing for your programming and asking yourself these 3 next questions in terms of being intentional about your programming and starting to think about the impact of your programming. So this is a PMIS statement, which I entered my world about 2 months ago. How many of you have dealt with PMIS statements? Every single one of you probably, and if you haven't, my guess is you will soon enough. So I just took one example out of about 20 or so that I read through. All identifying information is X'd out to protect the innocent. And so we're going to focus on the description, justification, and measurable results. This is really hard to read, so all I did is I just transcribed it. This is what the description says. So this is a great description of a program. It's great at telling you what they're going to do. So they're going to have 10 one-day camps, and they're going to do all of these things within those one-day camps. This is that perfect example of what are we doing. Gives you a well-rounded picture of what you can expect as a funder that this program is going to do. So this is a great example of the what. The justifications. This is a little bit more about who they're going to target, how they're going to actually do these programs. So they're going to do it by targeting local local children. So this becomes the what and the how. Great first steps. We all need this information in order to understand funding a program. The difference, and you could probably already see it on this screen just visually, is what happens when we get to the measurable results. It takes up 2.34 lines, as opposed to an entire screen that talked about what are we doing and the activities. So what are the results? Their outputs are going to be 10 one-day camps for 200 participants, and their somewhat outcomes are meeting these goals. And I did look them up. They're very nebulous. And there's actually a lot of things under 16 and 18 and 2B. I don't know what this program is going for. I don't know. They gave me a great description. They gave me a great list of activities. They told me who participates, but they didn't tell me why. Why are they doing this program? So they're basically shouting the what, they're shouting the how, and then they're whispering the why. This is why we're doing it. Your why should take up why on the page. The problem is the why gets buried here. And what's happening is these aren't coming out. These are your why. These questions aren't being answered in those measurable results. I don't know the difference this program is going to make to those 200 participants. I don't know the results that are going to come out of that list of activities that they were going to do. And I'm not sure, again, how people are going to benefit. So why should you shout why? Why should we be able to shout the why? So why is your why important, I guess is the question. I know this sounds really basic, but this program was missing it. It tells me why this program is important. Based on their measurable results of call to action number 16 and 18 in the GRPA goal 2B, I don't know why it's important. And the thing is, people read a lot of PMIS statements, people read a lot of grants. There are a lot of great programs out there, but if you don't tell me why your program is great, it's going to get lost. It describes the impact on your participants and community. So why does your audience matter? How do they benefit from this? This is all about your audience and your community. How do you impact them? How do they come away a changed person, a better person, a more informed person because of this? That's your impact. And then it lets people know that you make a difference. There's a reason you exist in your community. What hole would be there if this program didn't happen? What gap are you filling within your community to make it a better community? And that's letting people know the difference that you're going to make because of the program that you do. So my biggest thing, I read a lot of grant reviews, or I review a lot of grants. And it's amazing how often people, the what and the how, and then I have to guess. And as a reviewer, I don't want to guess. I want you to tell me. Because if I guess, I might guess wrong. I might undervalue some things. So tell people your why. Let them understand the impact, the difference, and the importance of your program. And that also goes for your stakeholders. Your stakeholder could be your boss or your superintendent. Think about how many programs your superintendent or your regional officer probably sees. Don't make them guess why your program's important. Let them know as part of that, and that's all part of setting those outcomes. Talking about the impact and the difference and the results you're going to achieve. And then your community as well, always thinking about your audience and letting them know why they should come to your programs, why they're important, and what they might get out of your programs. So thinking about these questions. So I went back and I reread that PMIS statement, who did a very good job of telling me what they're doing, the activities they're going to deliver, and who's participating, those original questions. And I tried to think about what would it look like if I added these questions, if I layered this on? And I went back and I read all of their descriptions and their justifications, and I thought about this. And if you read word for word and line for line all of their activities, this is what their outcomes look like. Here's the beautiful thing. All of this is essentially was embedded in their proposal. It was there, but it wasn't articulated. They didn't pull it out and tell me the why. So it's thinking a little bit, changing your mindset to think, I'm not just going to describe, I'm not going to just list, I'm going to think evaluatively, I'm going to think about change and outcomes. Okay, any first reactions when this pops up on screen as opposed to this? What are some thoughts?
I was going to say that certainly with this one that you have on screen now, to those who'd be approving these projects or prioritizing projects, it would almost be a no-brainer. Having done some of that in the past, this is consistently the weakest part of PMIS proposals.
Yep. So when you look at this, you're like, wow, how could I pass this program up? This looks fantastic. This does not scream fantastic. And it's the same program. It's all about your mindset and how you're thinking about your program and planning for your program, and then essentially selling your program. Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but I would guess that the person who wrote the first example, the short one, it's being very literal, tangible results. You can count 10 camps. And some of these, I dare you to figure out how you're going to measure positive attitudes towards nature. It's probably possible, but this is a little more daring. It's kind of assuming some of these are not quite as measurable as numbers.
Okay, so the idea of maybe, are all of these measurable? We don't need to get into that whole debate right now, but I will tell you that every single one of these are measurable. I didn't put one up here that wasn't. But I like the idea of starting to think about, if you put something up here, you need to kind of think about measurables. But these are, and actually you don't need surveys to do all of this. And that's something we can discuss a little bit in the afternoon, so kind of just hold on to that idea of what that might look like. Any other thoughts? I saw a couple other hands.
Yeah, I mean, these seem very qualitative.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've kind of been beaten over the head with for years is that, we don't want these feel-good sort of things. We want to know the numbers and what, how many people are going to be served, and that's what really counts. So for me, based on that idea, the earlier one is more effective because it's more quantitative.
Okay, so he was just saying that he's been told that the numbers are important. The 10 one-day camps for 200 participants. So that's actually an output, and it's going to be part of your measurable result, but there's an output and an outcome. So what you would probably do under your measurable results is you would say 10 one-day camps, 200 participants, this is what's going to happen to those 200 participants over the 10 days. You include both. But these are very specific outcomes as part of that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How long can it be on the measurable?
Great question.
It seems as though that might be a little too long, and if you could shorten it, because when they look at your measurable, they don't want too many things on, but directly to the point.
Exactly. I did not pay this man to be here because it will lead literally right into my next slide. So I did see another hand, so let me just come back to that because that was brilliant, by the way. So what Ben was just saying here is this too much? There's a lot of outcomes on this page. Are you setting yourself up essentially to not be able to achieve this if you try to get every single one of these outcomes? Okay. What I did though, and this is where that whole idea of backwards planning, if you read through the description of the program, they said they were going to do every single one of these things in a one-day camp. So then I, as a grant reviewer, I start to look at this and I start to think, I don't know about that. I'm not sure that's actually even possible to do that in a one-day camp with tweens and teens. So there's actually some flaw in the logic of this program. And this is where starting from your outcomes makes a lot of sense. If you started with this list of outcomes, and you could, absolutely, you would take this back and you would probably say, wow, what activities would I need to do to achieve these? And it would probably be a 6-month program in order to accomplish this, maybe even 2 times a week. So if my resources are one day for teens and tweens, what is the essence? What am I trying to get to? What are maybe the 2 to 3 outcomes that should happen because of this program? And that's why I think outcomes are a great starting point in terms of planning, because it doesn't let you overplan. Most people would never start with this and say, I'm going to do this in 6 hours. And it becomes really obvious when you see it this way, and it's much less obvious when you're writing your description of your program, because you get really excited about it. We're going to do this, and we're going to learn this, and it's going to be this activity, and we're going to have so much fun as part of this, and then it kind of balloons out of control, and it's not as focused as maybe it could. So I took the liberty, because I've already taken a lot of liberties, I took the liberty of, I'm going to get inside the programmer's head for a minute. And these are probably even still too many. But this is what I decided to focus. Outdoor exercise education was going to be the focus of this program, along with some national park principles. This, I think, could be done in a 6-hour, one-day program. They could learn leave no trace principles, which is very easy to measure. You can see what they knew at the beginning, and you see what they learned at the end. So they learned the no trace principles, gaining a deeper understanding, and then these 3 kind of all go together. So understanding the importance, sharing, and then the family is inspired to exercise more. So that would be the goal. Now, within this, any programmer here could probably come up with 10 different programs that we could focus on for here. But then again, that's why you have to define the success of that program. Choosing, to focus on just thinking about stewardship, thinking about inspiring people to participate. Those are all different programs with different activities and different resources. So in terms of the results, it's thinking about being really focused. What else about the way that they're written, framed, that kind of pops out to you in terms of an outcome? Yeah, Julia.
Well, it's in reading the ones that you've chosen up here. The top ones are all knowledge gained, and the bottom one is intent to behave. And I'm wondering if, like, for example, gain a deeper understanding of the mission of the National Park Service. I feel like, well, so what? Maybe what we really want is a positive attitude toward recreating in national parks, or a positive attitude. So maybe an attitude change could be taking one of the knowledge or 2 of the knowledge things out, making it simpler, and putting an attitude change in there.
So what Julia's picking up on is there's different things that are coming out of these outcomes. There's some knowledge gain, there's some behavior, so they're going to intend to incorporate or inspire to incorporate. And this is all what we're going to cover in this afternoon, are all the different ways that you can think about outcomes in terms of behavior, skills, aspiration, motivation, in order to frame your outcomes. So maybe it's too knowledge heavy as part of this.
Cannot accomplish, and then focus on what we can do. Yeah.
And a lot of this, so what I've heard earlier today, and actually what I heard in Philadelphia as well, is it's okay to try this, define this, and then find out that you didn't meet 2 of them. Brilliant. It's actually one of the best things I would argue that could happen to you, because you now realize, okay, so we were doing this program and I thought it was working, and now I realize that we're not hitting 2 and 3. Great. What do I have to go back and rethink in my activities? How do I change my activities? Or do I decide this is an important part of the program? It's actually extraneous to the program. It's bogging everything else down. Let's get rid of it. It's not an outcome for this program anymore. It allows me to focus on 1, 3, and 4 more and be more focused about what I'm doing. And so that's where the evaluation, especially when you're able to articulate these levels and then figure out if you achieve them or not, helps program planning and future program planning. Because you now know which part wasn't working as part of the whole. How do you change it, or how do you actually take it out of the program as part of that? We got one more?
I will also say that if I were reviewing this, I like the fact that it's a bullet point and there are keywords that jump out at me right away, as opposed to an entire paragraph of lots of extra words that aren't going to necessarily do the job. So you've got learn, gain, increase, share. They're keywords right away that jump out at you.
Great. So what she was saying is that the bullet points work for her, just kind of looking through, but also the words. And each one is very purposeful. Each one starts with an action verb. You will learn, you will gain, you will increase, you will share, you will aspire. It's all action moving towards something. Okay? And I have, I think, 1 minute. And actually, we're all the way at the end. So I think we can probably do one more comment or question. I think I saw a hand.
Mine was just real quick. The last 2 bullets are more audience-centered, and the first 2 are more what we want.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's also where you start to see, is your program really all about the Park Service? Or is your program really about your audience? Now, your audience gains because, I mean, anytime they can learn something, that's generally a positive thing. And a deep understanding is a positive thing. But these are things that affect their lives outside of the Park Service, but that they gained because they came to your park. And so that's also another thing in terms of looking at outcomes, is making sure that everything, this is really trying to understand your audience and how they benefit as part of this.
A broader learning opportunity for our agency, because sometimes we have really visionary desired outcomes for our programs that get articulated by maybe folks who aren't schooled in some learning theory. And then you try to build a program around that that's based on learning, knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors and so forth. It's like, oh no, we don't want that. We want something fun. So we need to raise our level of sophistication in order to know what sort of learning results in desired outcomes. Thank you for that.
Right, and then again, that feeds back into evaluating your outcomes. Are you achieving the desired outcomes? If fun is one of them, and that is an absolutely valid outcome, but are you achieving that through learning theory and maybe some of the bigger conceptual things that you're supposed to be dealing with as well? Okay. So real quick, because my time is up, but I get to speak to you this afternoon as well. So a little bit of what we're going to focus on, outcomes, because we're not finished yet. That was your little introduction to the topic. And also importantly, outputs, which a gentleman mentioned. Numbers are still important. They're actually half of the equation. So thinking about outputs and outcomes, and most importantly, the difference between the two, and what that looks like when you're thinking about your entire measurable results. And we'll also spend a little time writing some outcomes as well. I know it's not quite lunch yet, and I'm probably going to make you all salivate as part of this. This is another Yogi Bear, just to leave you in the end. But what I would like you to do over lunch is think about a program that you're working on right now in your park that you would like to start to think about, what would it look like if I attached outcomes to this? Or do I already have outcomes and I would love to just kind of workshop them and see what other people have to say. So if you can kind of come with that mindset for this afternoon. And that's it, I'll turn it over. Thank you. Beyond the cute animals. So part of what we mentioned earlier this morning was that measurable results, there's really two parts. of a measurable result. Now, I was focusing on the outcome portion this morning just because that's what the little snippet of conversation was about. But this afternoon, we're going to broaden it a little bit and start to look at the fact that there are two sides to a measurable result. One is not necessarily better than the other, but I just thought this was a fun way of looking at it. You may, oh, this is not my day, or, wee, I'm flying. But the idea that a measurable result is actually made up of outputs and outcomes. Both of them should be included in your measurable result. And maybe looking at some of the outputs will help our conversation from this morning. So your outputs, what are those? Those are the things that you can count. You can see them, you can count them, they're physical, they're tangible. It's the number of people that walk through your door, the number of volunteer hours that go into a program, the number of partner organizations. They're numbers, they're quantifiable. I took a guess, again, this is my guess based on our PMIS statement from this morning. They started listing outputs. They put that there are going to be 10 one-day camps and 200 participants, but there's actually more outputs to the story. So don't sell yourself short on that. There's actually more things that are going to come out of this program. There could be partners that you work with, collaborators. It's the hours that your staff put into this are part of the outputs as well. That could be paid staff, volunteer staff, ranger staff. I don't even know all the different levels of staff, but I know there are many levels of staff that go into this. And it could be coming down to, you know, if you write a new curriculum or you develop a new activity. That's all part of the outputs. So don't just stop at some of those high-level outputs. You know, there's 10 one-day camps and 200 participants. There's actually a lot more that go into your programs. And you want to let people know kind of that full breadth and depth of, again, what your time, your money, and your resources are producing as a result of this program. So again, I took some liberties with this. They didn't include all this information in their PMIS statement, but I think they're missing out by not including some of this more detailed information, because it's a broader and truer understanding of the program and the resources that are part of it. But again, outputs, things you can count, things you can see, things you can touch, that's the output. And so that's one side of the story. And this is where you get, again, a lot of the numbers. And we're all very good at counting numbers, and we should be. They're important. They're an important part of the story. But they're not the only part, because just because a lot of people come to a program doesn't make it the most impactful program. Sometimes larger programs have less impact per person. Smaller programs have greater impact per person. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm actually probably saying that you should have all of them. You should have a couple bigger programs with less impact and maybe a couple of smaller programs with bigger impact. Looking at that menu of choices in terms of your programming and in terms of your audience. But again, what it's really doing is it's giving you a truer sense of the program. So outputs, outcomes. Again, we looked at this morning. Your outcomes are the change that happens in your audience because of your program. They walk in one person, they go through your program, they walk out a different person. Something has changed inside of them, and that change is impact. That is the impact of your program. Change is a lot harder to see and to count. If it wasn't, a lot of people in the evaluation world wouldn't have a job. Part of it is measuring that change. Let's just focus on that change for a second. What are some ways that people can change at your park through your programs? How do they change? Okay, they can change their attitudes. How else?
Behaviors, for sure.
Okay, they can change behavior or behavioral intent. They can intend to change their behavior. What else? That's all
They
here.
increase their knowledge of these possibilities.
Okay, they can increase their knowledge. Let's change.
Change their perspective.
Change their perspective.
Feel empowered.
They can feel empowered. That's a change inside the person.
Increase or decrease participation.
Okay, they can increase or decrease their participation. That could be in society, that could be within the park, it could be a lot of different levels. What else? Okay, you can create stewards. Okay, so people can change in a lot of different ways. Based on your program, based on your park, based on your partners, based on your activities. And a lot of times what we're talking about and we're looking about are these short-term changes. This is what you measure during and right after a program. Maybe up to a couple weeks after, a month after the program. You can see that you've actually already acknowledged and listed most of them. So change of awareness, knowledge, attitudes, skills, opinion, aspirations, motivation, and behavioral intent. So these are all the different ways that somebody can change. And that's what an outcome is trying to generate. It is trying to capture their change in awareness. Are they gaining an awareness? Are they changing an attitude? Are they learning a new skill? Do they intend to act in a different way because of your program? Again, that's your impact. And so these are some of the things that you're going to be looking at and thinking about when you're thinking about your outcomes. You can go medium and long term. It actually kind of depends on the size and scope of the program that you're thinking about. But you start to understand that there's a logic here. If you can change somebody's awareness, their opinions, their skills, and their attitudes, you might change some of their decision making, some of their social action, how they participate in the community. And if you can change how one person acts or participates or creates a social action in the community, you can change a societal condition. That's the large goal. Not every program needs to have that large goal, but some do, and it's something to think about. But for a lot of what we focus on in the everyday world is looking at these short-term changes and trying to measure those. Any thoughts or comments about this before we move on? Yes.
I think we spent a lot of time, even with the short-term outcomes or impacts of overestimating our impact from one program, one interpretive encounter or experience.
Right.
And I know that it's a challenge because I know what Teresa goes through when she does her visitor voices, to separate out how one program influences somebody along a journey in life because it's cumulative. And so how can we be more realistic? We want to have meaningful, outcomes, goals, but not overreach what can be expected. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So what she was just saying is that we need to be realistic in our short-term outcomes. And part of how you do that is to acknowledge that you need to be realistic. I'll give you an example. I actually work with a lot of libraries. And in one short-term outcome, they were doing a story time. This was a 20-minute program that parents and children can come to once, maybe a few times. Their long-term outcome for that story time was to end illiteracy. That is a fabulous long-term outcome, fabulous, but it is not going to happen because of that particular program. And that is an example of where you have to be logical. And this is when you have to understand what are the small changes that I can expect. It's going to lead to incremental changes along the way. And part of that is having honest conversations with yourself, talking with colleagues about this. And also, again, it's your knowledge and your background. It's your profession is having an understanding of the impact to your visitors. You've seen it. Now we're going to try to find the language to quantify that and to capture that. But absolutely, be really, really, really conscious. One small program in itself is not going to change the world.
Yeah, I think when people are at sort of a threshold, when you see this when we're talking about interpreting climate change, it's a cumulative thing from all of their different informal and formal learning opportunities in their lives, as well as just their life experience. And so, perhaps we can start to learn how to hone in better at setting our goals first time they've ever heard anything about it, then maybe it's a very small incremental level of awareness. But maybe for those audience members, and we're obviously not going to know who is who, but for what we're still providing room in there for some audience members who are at that pivot point, that it will knock them over and they can move to real behavior attitude change.
Right, and so a large part of what she was just mentioning is knowing where your visitors are within their journey. And you can know that a little bit based on the program that you're doing. If this is a 15-minute introduction to, I'll throw climate change, because that was what you mentioned, that's probably going to be a first-time person that maybe is just beginning to gain an awareness. And that's all you're trying to do. That's your goal, is to increase somebody's awareness. Now you're doing a 6-week program where you're bringing in experts from across the field on all different levels of climate change. You're going to have very different outcomes. You're going to start to gain awareness, skills, motivation, behavioral intent. They're going to act differently. They're going to think differently. And so part of that is not only the size and scope of your program, but also knowing your audience at the time. And it's okay to start with one outcome that just says visitors are going to gain an awareness. And starting there, because sometimes that's all the program is actually meant to do, is to change a thinking or an attitude, or spark an idea that there is a different way of thinking or attitude.
Well, I think the flip side of that, of being realistic about what we can accomplish in a single program, is finding ways to look at, measure, and evaluate how we are having long-term cumulative impacts. Because I feel like when we're talking about the new goals of the interpretive development program in the 21st century, it includes world-changing stuff. And we, need to make sure we're not confusing all our staff in the field and thinking that they're going to, change the health, economy, and civic engagement level of their, participants in one program, but also that their efforts cumulatively might lead to that. And I don't know if that means targeted community-based studies or some studies that follow single people through multiple NPS experiences over multiple years. I know we already do an economic impact study in certain areas, and that does reveal that the NPS has an economic impact on its immediate community. But I guess, if we're going to have these outcome goals of societal change, how do we measure that?
And a longitudinal study is the way you would have to go with that. So the question was, how do you measure these long-term impacts? And you absolutely can. And I would advise you to find a local university that has a social research department and partner with that. Longitudinal studies, as the name implies, take a long time. Health studies take 20 years, 40 years, 60 years that they're following people in order to understand impact as you go through. So you absolutely can. And you could go and you could say, here's my strategic plan for 5 years that we're going to focus on this, and these are the types of programs, and we want to understand at the end of 5 years, have we made an impact? Is something you can look at, which is a really different question than, here are my outcomes for one program, and I'm going to try to understand the impact. So part of this is just figuring out where you are on the scale of what you're trying to do and thinking about your outcomes. But I would like to just concentrate right now on short term, because that's most of what you all are going to do. Here's just kind of a sampling of some of the wording that can be used for short-term outcomes. A lot of the times, these ideas are in your head. It's just trying to figure out how do you phrase that in kind of that action-oriented way. And so this, I could have actually probably gone on for 2 or 3 slides, but I just wanted to give you a quick example.
Are we getting a copy of your PowerPoint?
I believe yes.
All the materials, including recordings of everything that's going on in the room, all the support materials, including handouts and the PowerPoints, are going to be available to you.
On the ILBS website. Hopefully you guys are link to that in your newsletter.
So yes is the answer, which means you do not need to write all of these down right now. It's more of just to kind of give you a mindset. Because part of what I want to move into is this idea of looking at some outcomes from PMIS statements and thinking about the wording, thinking back to what are we looking for in terms of changes, and let's offer some changes to a few of these.
So here's one. The hope is that the intern will gain the skills necessary to be hired as a seasonal or permanent park ranger. Now, again, I will reiterate that these are actual true measurable results written in PMS statements, which is only to say that somebody thought this was a good idea. And so we want to just try to understand why was this not a good idea and what can we do to improve it so that when you go ahead and start to think about framing your own measurable results, you can use these to kind of improve your practice. So what about this one raises some red flags in terms of a measurable result? Oh, now I love hope and change. Probably shouldn't say that, but I do. So, but hope doesn't really belong in an outcome. Hope, to me, gets in that like wishy-washy, we don't really know what we're doing, we're kind of just flying by the seat of our pants kind of a thing. Here's the thing, you're all professionals. You do this for your job, you know what you're doing, you know your audience. Your outcomes are what you intend to happen. Now, if you want to go behind your back and be like, we also hope they happen, that's fine. But don't put that for your thunder. So, one way to just take this one real quickly is that the intern will gain the skills necessary to be hired as a seasonal or permanent park ranger. Just state it, don't hope it. I pull this out because I saw this more than once. We hope, we wish, we think. We're qualifying our outcomes, and that makes them weaker outcomes. So don't qualify that. Just state this is what we're going to do. Okay, participants will leave with a greater understanding, appreciation, and respect for the resources of the park and gain a greater sense of stewardship and land ethics which would carry over into the bounds of their personal environment. Thoughts? It's ambitious. That is a great word for it. Ambitious. What was?
Who talks like that?
Yeah. That's not kind of everyday language. What else? Somebody's whole life could be summed up in this one outcome.
Well, I think it just shows. I mean, it shows for one that all of us, not all of us, are professional at writing, and so we try and make it bigger and better and sound neater than we're actually. Like, I'll throw that word in there. It sounds real good. You know, but we're expected to have a professionally written project, and you can only be taught so much as far as being professional in your writing.
It's unattainable.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 2 comments. One is unattainable. And the second was sometimes we're not very confident in our ability to write outcomes, and so we try to inflate them because we think that makes them sound better. But I hope what this tries to do is that inflating it with a lot of jargon and like buzzwords does not make it sound better. It makes people giggle in an uncomfortable way when it comes up on a slide in a training workshop. So part of this idea is to keep it simple. If you notice, all of my outcomes that I wrote up there were one statement. Gain an awareness, have a deeper understanding, change of behavioral intent. I can't even remember all of my examples right now. So this idea of jargon and inflating the language to make it sound more grandiose is probably something that's just better kind of kept out of an outcome. Okay, then the other things, unattainable, ambitious. Again, if you were backwards planning, what would this program look like? Can anybody even try to put together?
30-day outward bound experience.
Y'all look like a 6-month focus group.
Yeah. Yes.
To some extent, though, I think, you know, there's genuine hope, to use that word, behind this, that a lot of interpreters think that this is their job, is that everything they do should do this. And so it's been written from a genuine spirit of thinking that I need to do this with everything that I do.
So here's the thing. This can be written into a great outcome. We just need to modify how it's written right now. The spirit is absolutely true, and it's probably a great program that goes behind it, but how do we make this a measurable, attainable, simple
specific outcome? And how do we strip away some of these words that are meant to inflate it beyond kind of its base?
Would it be fair to say it's 3 outcomes?
Okay, so there's a possibility that there's actually 3 outcomes hidden in here. So if we try to separate them out, is one way of doing it. Other thoughts on what this would look like if we tried to strip this down and create a measurable, attainable,
Well, this
specific.
has both short-term and long-term outcomes. And
Great.
maybe you could bullet point them under short-term and long-term.
Excellent. So what you just mentioned is there's actually short, medium, and long-term outcomes here. There's things that are going to happen right after the program. Then there's some things that they're going to change as they carry over into the bounds of personal environments. And so maybe this is, you could probably pull this out into short, medium, and long-term and just bullet this into those 3. Or we could bullet it into 3 different outcomes completely. Somebody want to just take an stab at what choosing one aspect of this and creating an outcome for it? Be brave.
You could maybe be more specific about what you hope them to understand or appreciate. So if this is the Leave No Trace course, you could say that they will, participants will understand 3 Leave No Trace principles, or they will have a behavioral intent, again, a separate goal to pack up the trash. Okay, is that too specific?
Nope. So what Lily was just saying is that if this, to her, this kind of reads like a Leave No Trace principles workshop that it might, so maybe they will leave with a greater understanding of the Leave No Trace principles, and then maybe list a couple things beyond that. They can, gaining a greater sense of stewardship is not a bad outcome. That could just be one in itself.
Laureen, Liz from the online says that participants will gain awareness of park resources.
Okay, perfect. So that's simplifying a lot of this greater understanding, appreciation, and respect. They're going to gain an awareness of park resources. Okay, so what this is meant to do is show you that jamming 3 or 4 outcomes into here is something that's dangerous. You want to keep those bullet points. You want to keep it readable. This is a mixture of short, medium, and long term. So one thing is actually leading to the other. And just being really careful with some of your language around this idea of appreciation and respect and carrying over and boundaries and resources. There's a lot of big language in here that doesn't need to be. Students will increase their understanding of the complex issues facing Charleston, including the increasing pressures of coastal development, zoning and land use disputes, and gentrification in neighborhoods. It's not a college course. It's a student tour. It's a 1-hour student tour. So what are some of our red flags for this one?
Everything after the first comma.
Okay, you said everything after the first comma.
Knowing it's a 1 hour.
You can go.
I was just saying, knowing it's a 1 hour tour, stating up front these are complex issues, is going to read script.
Yeah, so stating up front that it's a complex issue and then making it into a 1-hour tour is probably going, something's got to give there. One or the other.
It's achievable, but it's not written in a way that it sounds achievable, because you can cover these matters in a 1-hour tour. Whether or not you'll be a master of them all, I don't exactly know, but I think it's actually pretty achievable to cover the topics, just not holistically.
Okay. Can you see a way to rewrite this? Let's see. Okay.
Just to rewrite it, say students will be exposed to complex issues.
Okay.
That can be done in an hour.
And that's a semantic change, but I think we'd all agree that's a sea change in terms of what this outcome is actually saying. So students will be exposed to complex issues facing Charleston, including this, this, and this.
Or introduced to.
Introduced to. What is another way of tackling this to break it out into a better outcome? That's definitely one way.
Could you go further and explain how you're going to measure or how their awareness is demonstrated? Before the Park Service, I taught in public school, so when writing objectives and stuff, we had to actually put a number in there, like 80% of the class will be able to, by demonstrating this, something that was measurable in that setting. We do the same with this, or should it be that even included in the statements that we write? Because when I look at this and the one before, my mindset is not measurable because there's nothing, it's a statement. It could be measurable if you went one step further and said, they'll do this as demonstrated by, they're not kicking small animals anymore, or they're not feeding coke to the ground squirrels or something. We've had that. So, do you do that, or should you do that?
Okay, so his question was, do we put measurements in these? You can, you don't have to. So an example of a measurement, 90% of students will increase their understanding of. 80% of attendees will gain a deeper awareness of. And that's kind of adding quantifiable into your outcomes. You don't have to. You can. Because what that 80 or 90% does is you're setting a benchmark for yourself. You're saying that 100% of the students will not increase their understanding. That's actually kind of maybe unreasonable to think. And so we're going to set a benchmark of 75, 80, 90%.
And we were evaluating in the school setting, so we had that built in.
Right, and school settings definitely have that.
We're not, but if we were to, to stop them and quiz them, what percentage might be able to do these things?
So, but you also don't have to. You don't have to set that for yourself. You can just say that you want students, park visitors, whoever, to increase their knowledge, and you can kind of create a baseline for yourself and just understand how many people did. Or you can set a goal for yourself and say we want that 80 or 90%. Either way, you're still measuring. The only difference is one is giving you something to measure against, and the other is giving you information. Just information. You're not measuring against a goal. Does that make sense, or does that just confuse everybody? You don't need to have measurements, but you can. You can't put 90% of the students. Okay. One of the things to do with this is because you have 3 different things that you want them to increase their awareness of. Just because a student increases his or her awareness of coastal development does not mean that they increased their awareness of gentrification. So this could actually be 3 different outcomes. They're going to be exposed to increasing pressures of coastal developments. They're going to increase their knowledge of zoning and land use, and they're going to gain a deeper understanding of gentrification. 3 bullet points. Because just because you did one does not mean you did the other 2, so you measure them separately. It's 3 different outcomes. Okay. And last one. The connecting people to places theme of the call to action has 6 goals that directly apply to this project. These goals will be measured carefully throughout the life of the project. I mean, I don't know why I didn't get funding for its measurable results. All right, what's the problem here? Yeah, it doesn't really say anything. I mean, what do you take away from this? Do you know what the 6 goals are? Are all 6 goals directly applied? Because I've looked at the 6 goals. They're not necessarily all related, to one project. They're 6 goals, which I think you're meant to maybe choose a few. What else? Yes, saying that you're going to measure is not the same thing as saying what your outcomes are going to be. What are you going to measure? I don't know what your outcomes are. I don't know how you're measuring this or what you're measuring this against. So this is great, but implicitly you should be doing this. you don't actually need to state it, because that's your measurable results. So your measurable result is not to say that you're going to measure your project. This is also another one, just be really careful of that jargon of just putting a call to action, 6 goals. Again, even within the Park Service, how many of you know the call to action 6 goals right now? Right, so there's some people say there's 4. There's 30 something. I think last time I looked, there was 14. And there's 4 themes under, anyway, which is all to say that if within a room of chiefs of interim and different park rangers, we can't even understand what this measurable result is saying, then we have a problem. So again, this is the, don't be vague, don't make people guess, be specific, tell them what it is. And also, your measurable result is not saying you're going to measure the results. I saw this a lot of times over and over again. The activities were listed as the measurable results. So the measurable results said, we are going to deliver this activity. No, that's what you're going to do. What is your result because of that? So be really careful and not confuse what you're going to do with the fact that it's a result. Okay. So, what are some takeaways in terms of outcomes and how we should write them? What are some of the bigger themes that came up? Okay, simple. Keep it simple. Specific. That's an excellent word. I think I'll use it. Specific. And specific to me is simple. Measurable. Realistic. Okay, these are just some ideas to think about as you're going through. Keep it specific, clear, measurable, reasonable. And again, that goes back to the we're not ending literacy or illiteracy with one story time. Over the course of somebody's life, all these things might add up. And keep it action-oriented. The best goals usually start with a verb. You're going to learn, you're going to do, you're going to change. You're going to gain something as part of that. Okay. So what I'd like to do is, actually, if somebody could hit the lights, please. If everybody just wants to stand up and shake it out for a second. Get those pork sandwiches settled in our stomachs. Do some stretches. Shake the shoulders out a little bit. Some deep breaths. All right, so now we can sit back down. Part of what I'm going to do is now put this to the test. I find it really helpful to look at what somebody else has done and then try to figure out how I would do it better. I think it's a little bit harder to just start from your own and try to figure out how to formulate it. And so we're going to use all of the resources in the room just to say we're going to work together to figure this out. Now, as part of the activities back here, you have different posties that talk about what you're currently doing and what you could do. I would like to focus on could, if there is one at every table. What I'd like to do is figure out one person at the table that has posted what I could do up there, share it with the group, whoever posted it up there. I want to do some backwards planning. So this is a project that you're taking on. It's something that you could be doing. Whether it's a program, whether it's a personnel issue, whether it's an issue just for yourself, whether it's a process, whatever it is, let's think about this now from an outcomes perspective. So, you said you could be doing this, why? What are your outcomes for doing this thing? What do you want to achieve? And I want you to write your outcomes for it. And then think about backwards planning. So rather than just starting, well, this is what I want to do, so these are the resources I'm going to put into it, these are the activities, and we're going to see what happens, we're going to backwards plan. We're going to say, this is what I want to achieve, and then we're going to backwards plan to figure out how you're going to do that. So, to start, if within your tables, if you could share what you could be doing, if you added one or if you have one just in your head that you haven't added up there yet, then as a table, choose one to work on. Once you have that one, you're going to come up with your outcomes for that goal. The why are you doing this? What change do you want to see in yourself, in your staff, in administration, in your visitors, whoever you're writing this goal for? Okay? And then we're going to share them out and see what we come up with. Any questions? All right, get going then. So we're going to do some share outs. I'm going to pick on one table in particular because I think they had a really interesting conversation in that they didn't come to any definitive conclusion yet, to be determined, but I wanted them to share their process with you. So I'm going to start back here. Okay, so we went around and gave all of our coulds, and I said I want an interactive map. Michael, I think you said I want a way that visitors can ask questions about the exhibits. We had.
I want to talk to our partners.
I want to talk to our partners.
Inform us about what they're doing.
Right. So, and we talked about other things too, and we kind of went around and we got kind of caught up in this swirly of, but what is that outcome? What are we trying to get out of these things? What was the assignment? It's after lunch. We have lots of like barbecue, and we're really out of it. So, but I think what we discovered, and we just kind of went back to this idea of an interactive map. The park has some money for some accessibility. So, hey, we're going to make our map accessible. But then I said, well, wouldn't it be cool if it was interactive? But that's it. Is it cool? Is that why I want it? Because it would be really fun and cool and neat thing to do? Well, that's not where to go. The question to ask yourself then is, well, why? Why do you, what's your outcome that you want out of that interactive map? Why do you want that map to be interactive? You have to be able to answer that. Or you have to be able to answer, not even that, we just have to say, what are you trying to do here? And one thing we came just to illustrate it was we said, well, I can't have rangers in the visitor center all the time answering questions. Wouldn't it be great if visitors could help other visitors figure out where to go in the park? But is the interactive map the best way to do that? So that kind of going back to the what is it you want to get out of this project? And maybe it's not the map. Maybe that once you've thought through what you're really trying to achieve, you're going to say, no, wait a minute, this is a better way to do it. So, thank you. Thank you for being great and being your one of the reasons I love that example is I sat down and they were already starting to say, but wait, why do we want a map? What are we trying to accomplish? And that's exactly what this is supposed to be doing. Is their idea of what they could start doing is an interactive map. That sounds great, but this is getting why. Why an interactive map? And once you define your why, maybe an interactive map isn't the best solution, or maybe it is. But it makes you think about it and then be intentional in your planning going forward. Okay, I'm just going to randomly select tables because I'm already back here. So, over here. Thank you. We had a lot of discussions about site bulletins, and I took notes, so I'm going to try to distill. But Maureen at Mount Rushmore was saying, gosh, a lot of, and you also have the same challenge, a lot of old, outdated site bulletins. We could modify them and update them. But if we did that, we'd want to make sure we sort of figured out what subset of site bulletins we should have going forward. Perhaps there's some internal criteria we have to do, which ones align with our missions, how can we revise them to be tied to the MPS media standards and graphic identity, accessibility kinds of topics. So we sort of front-end load that set of thinking. And then we look at how does it affect audiences and what is the set of needs it can address on the ground. Going back to this morning with the me to we, connection, contribution, collaboration, co-creation, we actually set up a set of outcomes that moves through that tier. So we were looking at, well, we wanted to gain an understanding of topic. But for the park staff trying to facilitate the exchange at the info desk, we want to streamline their ability to answer common questions. So we want to make sure that the site bulletins provide an in-depth understanding, but also help to
address those key questions that keep popping up. Then moving down, we said, well, what if the site bulletin wasn't a static piece of paper, but it had a way to be spurring them to action on site. So it included some kinds of hands-on jumping off or navigating around to see something cool, or you could use it to further explore the topic. Then we said, well, it doesn't have to be on site, hands-on. It could be virtual, maybe after the visit, ongoing interaction. So we went to the facilitated dialogue question that could be at the bottom of the site bulletin, maybe takes you off to a Google site where they could answer and read all of their comments. And then some of those comments maybe are curated and feedback to park Facebook posts, and then we see which ones gain the most traction, and then pretty soon a percentage of these site bulletin topics move to the wiki format, and we do some co-created with the audience production of a new and enhanced site bulletin, and then we measure outcomes at all those levels. Wow.
We just designed the site bulletin program for the content over here. Brilliant people.
All right, excellent work. I know that sounds like a lot, but what an interesting conversation that comes out of the question, why do we redo the site bulletins? Why? What is our outcome? And all of a sudden you've got all these fabulous ideas that you may be able to do one of, maybe two, maybe all four. But it's this idea that you're having an intentional conversation around what it would be like if the site bulletins look different. Okay, excellent. I'm looking at this table right here. We have a spokesperson?
Our one thing was that we wanted to engage young people on social media. And when we started thinking about all the possible whys of that, we realized we were actually thinking in a whole bunch of different directions, and we couldn't go in all those different directions with one single product. So what we settled on was that the outcome we really wanted was to better understand the needs of young people through social media. So we want to better understand the needs of an under 35 audience through increased engagement with them on social media.
Perfect. And that's a great example of a specific, clear, measurable outcome. And I did sit at this table at the beginning, and they were off on like 10 different social media campaigns. Because their broad thing of what they wanted to do was increase their social media presence. Well, first of all, what does that even mean? And second, why? And when they all started sitting around and thinking about this, they all had kind of slightly different ideas of their outcome. And each outcome would lead to a different activity. So they had to really narrow that down and be very specific about what they wanted to do.
Can I show the distance?
Sure, thank you.
All right, we had about 30 learners on the distance program, and they were interested mostly in the golden rule, which is the superintendent tells you that's what you're going to do. So that's where they were starting from. A lot of energy around bio blitzes. So that's an idea that people had said that there was a lot of energy around from their management and the resource management in connecting those with their interpretive group. So they were sort of more or less said that's a good thing to focus on because a lot of people want it. And so from there, focused on some outcomes like generate public interest in birding, document all the species of birds in the park, encourage STEM and STEAM with young girls and Girl Scout troops, create intergenerational learning opportunities, connect resource management interns with interpretive techniques, and foster interdivisional cooperation because it's a whole park operation.
Great, thank you. And one thing I will mention just about that list real quick, it's a great example of the activities that are going to get them to the outcomes, but those in themselves are not the outcomes. Does that make sense? So documenting birds in the park is a great way to get to the outcome, but that's not a result. It's not an outcome in itself. Okay. I'm going to head over to this corner of the room. We have our representative here.
Ours was kind of the same with the increase our social media presence with my park. It's something that I don't have any experience with. We do have a Facebook page, but what I'd like to do is reach out to again to the younger generation and and be able to open up a dialogue with them as to why they want to come to the park, why don't they come to the park, and open a dialogue with them to hopefully try to get them to come out and see all the different things that we have to offer. Even though we are a Civil War battlefield, we're still 4,300 acres of hiking trails and nature, and just let the kids know that there are other things that we have to offer other than just the Civil War. And so we want to increase the community's knowledge and the younger generation's knowledge of what our park has that we can offer them, and to open the dialogue up with them so that we can find out exactly what they're looking for.
Thank you. And one thing I think a lot of times to think about in terms of outcomes is always remembering that there's the outcomes in terms of like increasing their knowledge and gaining towards the audience, but then there's that second part of that outcome is increasing the dialogue, the second outcome. But it's that really important part of we're just not always giving to them in terms of telling them the knowledge, but there's that deeper level too of having the dialogue. So it's a nice two outcome for that one. Let's see, we have time for two more, which means we can't get to everybody. Is anybody dying to let us know what they discussed? I know you all are. Shall I just roll in? Go right ahead first. All right, go back here. Thank you.
So Ben Hayes, Klondike Gold Rush, Skagway, Alaska. So we have a historical Bush town, and often the story of the quote good time girls of the Klondike is a Disney version. So we want to provide visitors with the opportunity to become aware of, you know, the true nature of sex workers in town. We have several historic buildings that we manage that were used as brothels. And we also want to have an opportunity for visitors to connect the story with modern struggles that women face, in particular with the struggle for women's equality. And we want to do that through interpreting the story in the place that it happened and having some opportunities for facilitated dialogues in those areas too.
Thank you, and I'll just add to that real quick because I sat on their table as well. One of the things that I challenged them to do was to go beyond the visitors will gain an awareness of. That is a great outcome. It's by no means a bad thing. It's a change in a person. They have more knowledge now and more awareness than they did before. But how can we go deeper, especially with a topic like this, where there's maybe some empathy, you can change perceptions, you can change attitudes, and also have some great present day conversations between sex workers today, sex workers back then, but really kind of take that deeper dive and go beyond that gaining awareness. So that's a challenge I actually put forward to all of you when thinking about your programs and some of your outcomes, is how do you take that deeper dive beyond that first one, gain an awareness of? How do you go deeper into some of those? Okay, I'm just gonna actually wrap it up with, if anybody has last questions or comments, either about this activity and if it made you kind of rethink anything about outcomes in general. Any last parting thoughts?
Just clarify, I still got a little bit muddled up on it, or is there a difference between outcome and impact? Impact obviously being harder to evaluate, you need professional assistance in order to evaluate that generally, but that being what happens in an audience member versus outcome is not quite that, and output, I understand it from the output and outcome, but can you just talk a little bit about outcome and impact?
So she was just asking what the difference is between an outcome and an impact. I actually consider them the same. Not everybody does, so we can have a little discussion about that. I believe that any sort of change in a person is an impact on that person. Some people use impact in the bigger, broader, long-term outcome sense, and they separate it from that initial change to what happens to them later on as an impact. I don't separate the two.
And I will use those words impact and outcome interchangeably.
I guess where we got hung up on it over here a little bit was, in thinking about outcome, which is often twofold for us. It's an outcome for needs of the park, and then there's an outcome for the audience that generally tends to be more of an impact.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we didn't talk about here, but there's an outcome for the park a lot of times for these programs. We were focusing more on the visitor because we went from the audience center today, so I wanted to play off of that. But absolutely, there are outcomes that relate to your rangers, to your staff in general, to your park itself, to your buildings. They can all have outcomes as part of a program. I was just focusing on the audience center today because it fed into what you were doing. But yes, you can have park outcomes as well for programs. Okay, my time is up for today, so I thank you all very much.